Hi, I'm Nancy. Thanks for stopping by my channel. A Square Pillow Isn't Square, the place where you will find tips, techniques, advice, and tutorials to help you learn about all things related to sewing for the home. Today's video is going to answer the question, can you hang a working Roman shade from a decorative rod? The answer is yes, and I'm going to show you how to do it. And just to be clear, this video is not going to be an instructional video on how to make a Roman shade. At some point I'll actually make a video about how to do that, but there's a million of them out there, so you can find one that you like until I get around to making mine. This video is specifically about how to change the mounting method from a board mount to a rod mount. For demonstration purposes, I'm just going to use some photos I took from an installation I did recently of this little soft cloud shade. Don't worry if you don't like the style. The method that I use to install functional shades on rods is the same whether it's a gathered shade like this or a flat Roman shade. Before I get to the instructions on how to do it, there's a few things that you need to know first. The first thing is that you cannot retrofit an existing shade that's board mounted to go onto a curtain rod. You're going to need to make the decision about how you want to mount this shade before it's fabricated so that it can be made the correct length, width, and it'll have the right size rod pocket. So in order to determine the right size rod pocket, you're also going to have to decide what type of rod, what type of curtain rod are you going to use to hang your shade and at what height you're going to hang it. Without knowing these things, you simply won't know the correct length for your finished Roman shade or the correct rod pocket size. So make those decisions first. Okay, well, what is a good type of rod to use to rod mount a Roman shade? The type of rods I recommend for this are either a wood rod that's 1 3/8 inches in diameter or smaller, not including the finial, a wrought iron or metal rod that's 1 1/8 inch in diameter or smaller, or a standard white oval curtain rod. And the main reason for keeping the diameter on our rods small is that we don't want the thickness of the rod or the width of the finial to make our shade project out any farther from the wall than necessary. With Roman shades, the closer you can mount it to the window, the better the outcome's going to be. So let's keep our diameter on the small side. And tip number 3, the last tip before we get started, is choose the right window to rod mount your Roman shade on. Here's the window that we made our little demonstration Roman shade for. I'll tell you why this is a good window choice. Most importantly, it has wood trim around it. You'll see why that's important in a minute. It's also a good width. You don't want to have a really wide window where you're going to need multiple supports on your rod, or you're going to have a really heavy shade to lift. And lastly, just make sure you have enough room on either side to put your brackets and finials. Make sure that you have enough room above your window to mount the rod that you've chosen. Doesn't look like there's much room above this one, but it's enough room for the rod that we've chosen for this particular shade. All right, there's one of 2 problems that we have to address in order to hang our Roman shade from a curtain rod. The first problem you're going to come across is projection. As you can see, most decorative hardware comes with a standard projection bracket, which can be anywhere from 3.5 inches to 6 inches away from the wall. I actually have made a video about 7 tips to know before you sew your Roman shade. And one of the important tips is that you need to keep your projection as small as possible. You want to keep your shade as close as possible to your wall. And as you can see, that's a problem with decorative wall brackets. Now, some higher end hardware lines give you different bracket projection options. They may have a close mount bracket that matches your hardware and may only project a couple of inches, but most of them do not. So what do you do about the mounting bracket? Well, this is where you have to get really creative and think outside the box. If you've chosen to use a wood rod, your solution here is going to be an L bracket, or they're also known as angle irons. L brackets come in lots of different sizes, so it's easy to find one that will be the correct projection for your rod. And all you do is you put one end on the wall, and the rod attaches underneath the bracket. As I'm showing it here, you screw in just through the top of the L bracket into the top of the rod. And if you have a rod pocket on your shade, that will mean that you need to make a little slit in the fabric or punch a little hole with a nail, and you will be screwing through the top of your rod pocket. But this will secure your rod in place very firmly, and you'll never even see the bracket when it's installed. If you've chosen an iron or metal rod, clearly you can't screw into it, but metal rods often come with adjustable brackets where wood rods don't normally come that way. So if you can find a metal rod with an adjustable bracket that gives you a close mount projection, that's ideal. But if you can't, I have found that an oversized cup hook or a similar type piece of hardware that you can find in your home improvement store can work really nicely on metal rods. Just make sure that the hook you get will give you enough clearance for your rod after it's screwed in. And our third option is a standard white oval curtain rod. The nice thing about these white curtain rods that you can find in any store or you can buy online is that they're really economical, and they're available in quite a few different projection sizes. So the one here is a 3.5-inch projection, but the one that I used on this little shade in this customer's house is a little 2-inch projection, which was perfect for this job, perfect for the Roman shade, and they also come with the little mounting brackets. So that's a good option if you've got the type of shade that can bend around the corner and hide the curtain rod. The reason that you can get away with using this kind of hardware is that, as you're going to see next, the rod itself doesn't take any stress, strain, or weight from the window treatment. So other than just bearing the weight of the fabric itself, all the strain that's going to come from pulling that shade up and down is going to be put somewhere else. All right, so now you know everything that you need to know about how you're going to hang your rod, how big your rod pocket needs to be, how far your rod's going to project from the wall, how high you're going to mount it. You know everything you need to know to make your shade. So let's do that. Okay, so now I have made my Roman shade. I have my rod pocket all pinned and ready to sew. I have all of my Roman shade rings sewn on in the correct rows. And now I am stitching my rod pocket closed. My shade is completely finished being sewn at this point. And now you're going to string your Roman shade like you normally would, only you are going to pretend that you have a board with screw eyes on the top of the shade. You're simply going to string it and bring your cords around like you normally would be stringing your finished Roman shade. So leave lots of extra cord because we are going to string this at the window. All right, so the big trick to making this all work is now what we're going to do is we're going to use the window trim that I told you is a good idea to have around your window. We're going to use this window trim to put our screw eyes that normally you would put in the bottom of your Roman shade mounting board. We're going to actually put them into the window trim itself. You are going to put a screw eye in the window trim every place you would have put it on your mounting board. So if your strings on the back of your shade are spaced 12 inches apart, you are going to space your screw eyes 12 inches apart, and of course you'll center them correctly on the window trim just like they are centered on your board. The goal is to have a screw eye in place behind every string that is strung through your Roman shade. I strongly recommend that you either drill a pilot hole in the wood trim or make a starter hole with a hammer and a large nail because if you just start putting your screw eye into the wood trim, you might split it. Next, install your drapery rod or your curtain rod. The only thing that's really important here is that it's centered on the window and that it is a little bit above your screw eyes. As long as your rod is above your screw eyes, this is going to work for you. And for safety, make sure that whatever brackets you're using to install your rod are either screwed into a stud or into a wall anchor. Next, you're going to put your shade onto your rod. And if it's got fullness like this, make sure it's distributed correctly so that every row of rings and every string lines up perfectly with your screw eyes. Now you simply run your strings through your screw eyes just like you would if you were stringing it onto a wooden mounting. In this case, I've strung my shade for a left-hand draw. Then adjust and tie off your cords, braid them or finish them in whatever method you normally use, attach your cord cleat, and you're done. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. I have lots of other great information on here with a lot more to come. Thanks for watching and happy sewing!